Well, it's been 1 week since the arrest of Sean Diddy Combs on federal charges, and living behind bars is the exact opposite of what he has been used to. The Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn is a place that's been described as hell on earth.
MDC is so bad, federal judges have questioned the harsh conditions for those here awaiting trial. So bad, I was here 2 years ago during a cold spell, reporting on detainees with no heat, pounding on windows for help. There was even a congressional inquiry. But take the word of a former inmate I spoke with who goes by Esco.
It's terrible. The food is terrible. Of course, the inmates are terrible. The guards are terrible. The conditions are terrible. It's just terrible.
It's been a whirlwind week for Sean Diddy Combs, the music mogul known for his luxury and extravagance for decades. Instead of mingling with celebrities and hosting opulent parties, Diddy now finds himself in the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn, facing a drastically different reality. He was arrested on federal charges, including sex trafficking, racketeering conspiracy, forced labor, and transportation for prostitution. Diddy has pleaded not guilty to all allegations, despite proposing a substantial $50 million bail package.
Breaking news to tell you about on the sex trafficking and racketeering federal charges against Sean Diddy Combs. A second judge within the hour has denied his plea to be released on bail. Combs is accused of abusing women for years, and he's going to stay in jail, apparently, after this ruling. Eyewitness News reporter Darla Miles live at the courthouse in Lower Manhattan with the breaking news. Darla.
Bill, Diddy's attorneys went before a different judge today in a different courtroom, hoping for a different ruling and hoping that Diddy would be able to leave this courthouse today, on a $50 million bond. But that did not work out as planned after federal prosecutors tipped the hand on their case and provided more details. The judge, again, for a second time, said no. For a second straight day inside of a federal courthouse, prosecutors and defense attorneys for Sean Diddy Combs spending hours going back and forth about releasing him on bail. Today's arguments centering on two issues: risk of flight and witness tampering. Federal prosecutors telling the court victims and witnesses have universally expressed their extreme fear of the 54-year-old hip-hop icon. One woman describing her reaction to the civil suit filed by Cassie Ventura.
The Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn is far from the Ritz-Carlton. It has often been described as hell on earth. The facility has faced criticism for its harsh conditions, with reports from former inmates and legal experts painting a grim picture of overcrowding, rampant violence, inadequate food, and a general lack of basic amenities.
Disgraced music mogul Sean Diddy Combs, once known for his lavish lifestyle and living large in his multi-million-dollar mansions, has a new home as he awaits trial in his federal sex trafficking case. Last week, the Bad Boy Founder's defense team unsuccessfully fought to keep the music producer out of federal jail after his arrest. Now his new digs once house other high-profile inmates, including R. Kelly, Fetty Wap, Sam Bankman-Fried, and Ghislaine Maxwell. Diddy is currently housed at the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn, New York, a stark difference from the glitz, glamour, and wealth in Hollywood and Star Island in Miami Beach, Florida. But MDC Brooklyn has been described as hell on earth, with horrifying conditions. The facility, which now houses Diddy, opened in the early 90s and is the only federal jail in New York City after the Bureau of Prisons closed its Metropolitan Correctional Center in 2021 after many issues came to light in the wake of Jeffrey Epstein's suicide just 2 years early.
Placed in the special housing unit, SHU, and on suicide watch due to his high-profile status, Diddy is now facing the stark reality of prison life. The SHU is specifically designed to protect inmates deemed at risk because of their celebrity status or other factors. For Diddy, this means extreme isolation, no contact with other inmates, and no VIP treatment, just the bare minimum necessities for survival.
Diddy's attorney argued in legal paperwork MDC Brooklyn is not fit for pretrial detention, citing detainee deaths and other concerns. His attorney, Mark Agnifilo, asked the judge for Diddy to be moved to a New Jersey jail, but the judge says it's up to the Bureau of Prisons to decide. And while Diddy is being housed in a special housing unit, also known as the SHU, officials say he's not receiving any special treatment, but are closely monitoring him as he's been placed on procedural suicide watch in case the disgraced producer attempts to harm himself. But his attorney says his client is not at all suicidal, saying the mogul is strong, healthy, confident, and focused on his
life in the special housing unit, SHU, is grueling, with inmates confined to their cells for 23 hours a day, permitted outside only for brief periods of recreation and meals. The food is notoriously bad, with former inmates describing it as barely edible. This harsh environment could explain reports that Diddy isn't eating, as he may fear that his food could be tampered with or poisoned.
Attorneys are saying that the conditions there at MDC are horrific, horrendous, they're not appropriate to stay in. What is your experience there? Is it really as horrendous as they're saying?
I've had many clients who were housed in MDC Brooklyn, and I can tell you the reports that the facility is something that is less than desirable is 100% accurate. There's been a lot of reports of it being below standard in terms of prison standards. And of course, a prison isn't meant to be a comfortable place, but of course, they have to provide the basic human rights to their inmates. And MDC Brooklyn has been plagued with overcrowding, with violence, with poor food, with poor cleanliness. And P. Diddy, who is in a protective custody unit, is still experiencing all the bad things that MDC Brooklyn has to offer, and it doesn't have a lot to offer in terms of comfort or things that an inmate would be looking for.
The isolation is perhaps the hardest aspect of life in the SHU. High-profile inmates like Diddy are kept under constant surveillance, wearing tear-away paper garments and rubber shower shoes to prevent self-harm. There's no pillow, just a bed and a blanket. Electronic devices are banned, although he might be allowed a radio for short periods. This stark existence is a far cry from the mansions and private jets he once enjoyed.
And certainly, Diddy would be facing potential dangers, because a prison, by virtue of it being a prison, is not necessarily a good place to be. It's not a safe place to be, but particularly this facility is known to have a lot of problems in the last few years.
What would it look like for Diddy in this protective care unit, I guess? He's separated from general population, but what is his day-to-day like?
So Diddy's life in the SHU, in that specialized housing unit where he's been placed for his own safety, is going to be something that's rather routine and mundane. He's not going to be necessarily even enjoying some of the things that general population, aka Gen Pop, enjoys, because he's being in a special segregated unit for his own safety, which means he's going to be under more constant observation by guards. His comings and goings in and out of his cell for recreational time and for meal time are going to be more scrutinized. So although the SHU unit is technically for the prison inmate's safety, and of course Diddy, being a high-profile inmate, requires that, it also means more restrictions for that inmate.
Being incarcerated in the Metropolitan Detention Center, MEC, Brooklyn presents significant challenges for Diddy's legal defense. Communication with his attorneys is restricted to specific times, and all interactions are closely monitored. There's no special treatment for celebrity defendants, meaning Diddy has to meet his lawyers in the same communal areas as other inmates.
He has pleaded not guilty to these charges, so of course we're expecting him to bring a strong defense with his attorneys, his team. Obviously they're going to be preparing, but does it add a layer of challenge, the fact that Diddy is behind bars? What does it look like for attorneys hoping to meet with him? Would they have their own rooms? Would they talk over those phone things we see in movies? What would it really look like?
So when you have a client who is behind bars, you are meeting with them on legal visits, and you are talking to them on a secured line, which is an attorney or legal call, where it's not being recorded and it's afforded that privilege, that attorney-client privilege, that privacy there. But it does present hurdles when having a client behind bars, because you're sort of really reliant on A, the prison schedule, B, the prison calls. You can't call your client, they're calling you. So even if you have something that you need to talk to your client about urgently, you gotta wait until you get that prison call from prison, or you're making that visit yourself to jail to have a legal visit.
Moreover, the lack of reliable Wi-Fi in MEC Brooklyn poses a significant hindrance to Diddy's legal defense. His case involves massive amounts of digital evidence, with prosecutors citing hundreds of terabytes of data. Without proper access to this information, building a robust defense becomes even more challenging.
Abused, threatened, and coerced women and others around him to fulfill sexual desires, protect his reputation, and conceal his conduct. Exactly what you had just said. Some of these actions allegedly, they go back to 2009.
Well, and a lot, which hurts him, because there's a lot of witnesses, a lot of history, a lot of communications that probably the government has already accessed to support the allegations. But again, a lot of this also came out from lawsuits that were filed by women against P. Diddy. Right. And those lawsuits laid out a lot of this, what's in the indictment against P. Diddy. And these are people that are going to serve as witnesses when this goes to trial.
Okay, so let's just say you are his lawyer.
Right.
What's his defense?
His defense here is that the government has no business going into the private affairs of what happens in someone's bedroom, that these acts were entirely consensual, that these witnesses, really a lot of them wanted to be in P. Diddy's circle of celebrity. They, what you have here are some of these people that have sued him engaged in nothing more than a money grab.
The charges against Diddy are severe and present a disturbing picture of his alleged activities. The federal indictment accuses him of operating a criminal enterprise that engaged in sex trafficking, forced labor, kidnapping, arson, bribery, and obstruction of justice. It outlines a troubling pattern of abuse, particularly against women, involving verbal, emotional, physical, and sexual violence.
That used the business empire he controlled to carry out criminal activity, including sex trafficking, forced labor, kidnapping, arson, bribery, and the obstruction of justice. Let me say a little bit more about the charges. The indictment alleges that Combs abused and exploited women and other people for years, and in a variety of ways. As alleged, Combs used force, threats of force, and coercion to cause victims to engage in extended sexual performances with male commercial sex workers, some of whom he transported or caused to be transported over state lines. Combs allegedly planned and controlled the sex performances, which he called freak-offs, and he often electronically recorded them. The freak-offs sometimes lasted days at a time, involved multiple commercial sex workers, and often involved a variety of narcotics, such as ketamine, ecstasy, and GHB, which Combs distributed to the victims to keep them obedient and compliant. As alleged, when Combs didn't get his way, he was violent, and he subjected victims to physical, emotional, and verbal abuse.
A particularly shocking aspect of the indictment is the allegation of elaborate sex parties that Diddy allegedly organized and recorded without the participants' consent. Federal authorities discovered 1,000 bottles of lubricant and baby oil during raids on his properties, highlighting the extent of these activities. Diddy's legal journey is just beginning, and it's expected to be long and arduous, with his next court date scheduled for October 9th. The complexities of his case suggest that it could take years before a final resolution is reached. In the meantime, he remains in Brooklyn, grappling with the harsh realities of prison life. Criminal defense attorney Imran Ansari, who has represented other high-profile defendants like Harvey Weinstein and 50 Cent, emphasizes the psychological impact of such a dramatic lifestyle change. Transitioning from mansions and red carpets to a cramped cell can be incredibly disorienting and stressful, adding another layer of difficulty to an already challenging situation.
Hey, Sylvia. Hey, Terrence. Anytime. Thank you for having me.
Okay, so let's just get right to it. How's Diddy reacting to everything that's going on right now? What have you guys heard?
Well, his attorney says he's in good spirits, but let's be honest here. Diddy's life is on the line. You were talking about incredibly serious federal charges, one of them being sex trafficking that could quite literally carry a life sentence in prison. So, again, while his attorney says Diddy is happy to be in this position because it's going to afford him the opportunity to, they say, to clear his name, he is sitting in a jail cell right now. He could be sitting in a jail cell for the foreseeable future, and like we just said, could be facing decades or more in prison if ultimately convicted. The attorney says that he's an imperfect person, like we all are, but that he's not a criminal, that he's not a violent person, and that he will prove his innocence ultimately in this courtroom.
Yeah, this is all over social media.
Brooklyn is no stranger to housing high-profile inmates. Figures like R. Kelly, Ghislaine Maxwell, and Sam Bankman-Fried have all spent time manned. Each of these cases has drawn significant media attention, highlighting the conditions and challenges faced by celebrity defendants. Former inmate and founder of Wall Street Prison Consultants, Larry Levine, sheds light on what Diddy might be experiencing. Levine describes the SHU as a place of extreme loneliness and desperation, where inmates are often prescribed psychiatric medications to cope with the harsh environment.
DC is no stranger to high-profile inmates. previously housing R. Kelly, Ghislaine Maxwell, and Sam Bankman-Fried, who's actually there right now. Bankman-Fried was convicted of fraud and money laundering last November after the collapse of his cryptocurrency exchange, FTX. And as it happens, Bankman-Fried and Diddy are being housed in the same part of MDC, a unit for inmates that requires special protection. That's people like Diddy or Bankman-Fried who are high-profile names, but it also cares for inmates who may need protection as they assist with ongoing investigations in open cases. Since Diddy's move to this area of MDC, there are reports that he's spoken briefly to his children over the phone. Diddy has 7 children, ranging in age from 33 to 23 months old. According to reports, Diddy is concerned about how his kids are handling his arrest and detainment. And meanwhile, they're allegedly in a state of crisis after only experiencing Diddy as a loving, devoted father.
The public and media are closely watching Diddy's case, with TMZ covering the story extensively and highlighting both the legal aspects and the human interest elements. Legal analysts agree that the evidence against Diddy is substantial, and the prosecution's all-female team is expected to mount a tough fight. Michael Babcock from TMZ notes that while Diddy's attorney claims he is in good spirits and ready to fight the charges, the reality is grim. The potential for a life sentence looms large, and even if Diddy manages to clear his name, the process is expected to be long and grueling.
Also at MDC Los Angeles, it's like a cookie cutter of the MDC in New York. So yeah, I do know. But he's sitting in the shoe. He's in the hole. And this guy is going through loneliness, anxiety, desperation. He's on suicide watch, and they hand out like psych meds, like they're M&Ms to these inmates to try to get them to cope with what's going on. So his entire existence is to sit in this little cell, essentially. He can shower 3 times a week. He's not getting any real visits. If his lawyer does a legal visit, they have to come upstairs into the special housing unit to see him. Now, have you seen these reports about all these commissary items they say that he could buy? Any of those?
What was one of them? Steak or something?
Ribeye, steak,
Yeah.
I mean, all kinds of nonsense. He's in the shoe, people. He's in a special housing unit. He cannot buy things off the regular commissary list.
So this is rocking his world right
You
now.
can buy a radio.
Yeah, this is rocking his world right now.